Hello there, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are. It's me, your favourite friendly furbog who hangs around the internet. It's Addison here with another episode of the Pod of Many Things, where I'm going to be talking to my friend from Twitter, Oscar Wightman, about stepping into the dark side and that famous Billie Eilish song of being the bad guys. So, Oscar, are you alright? How you doing, mate?
I'm doing very good, thanks. How are you?
I'm alright. I'm good. We've just had a long weekend as of recording this. So we're relaxed, we're good, and we're going to talk about some bad guy design. But first, Oscar, introduce yourself to the people. Let people know who you are, what you do, in terms of the tabletop RPG space, and maybe a little bit about your history in the tabletop RPG space as well.
Yeah, so I'm Oscar Wightman. I'm a TRPG writer and also a game designer. I do a lot of game design and writing stuff in a lot of different spaces, although not a lot of it is online at the moment, but I'm working on a lot of projects that hopefully should see the light of day soon. I've been playing TRPGs for not that long, actually, compared to some of the veterans. I've been playing for about 2 or 3 years, just after I got into all the buzz that's been happening really recently, although I've always really been interested in it.
Yeah. Did you like any other like tabletop RPG like adjacent hobbies beforehand, like say Warhammer or board games or like?
I mean, I have always really loved engaging in things like you say, role playing and board games. I remember once I did sit in on a Warhammer game. I watched it and I was enthralled, and I completely forgot about it. many years later down the line, I got I've never fully played a game of Warhammer, mostly because it's very expensive to get into.
Yeah.
But I think the concept and the idea of war games and role-playing games were always kind of in the back of my mind, interesting me. And only very recently did I realize, oh yeah, I can actually go away and do that. All my friends are really interested in things like this, so we can go away and make it happen.
That's cool. Well, that's kind of what happens to everyone, isn't it? Like we like an adjacent thing, especially in the current like renaissance of the tabletop RPG hobby, which, depending on where you sit on that, is a good or a bad thing. I am of the belief that if something increases in popularity and it increases the breadth and of experience that you have in a certain thing, that can only be good. But I am but one person. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. I think we've, especially from my perspective, where so many over the last 10 years we have these amazing role-playing games, as in like actual video games, come out, and now we have this kind of a bit of a, I won't necessarily say lull, because we've got a lot of interesting things coming out at the moment. These periods between games are getting longer and longer. People want to find those experiences, and I think myself personally and a lot of other people who are getting into the genre are finding it in TRPGs, which is a really great thing.
Do you also think that going on this bit, and I know we'll come to the meat and potatoes of the video in a minute, but do you also think that in this age of like hyper connectivity through like screens and stuff, through like your phone and social media and Zoom and stuff like that, and like video game like lobbies and stuff, the reason why there's been a bit of like a kickback, almost like a counterculture backlash to that has resulted in the tabletop RPG revival, is because of the fact that we want those more human experiences, like things that are more interactive but also interpersonal.
Absolutely. I think especially because when you look at the most popular multiplayer video games at the moment, you're not seeing a lot of co-op narratives anymore. Like if you think about the most popular multiplayer games at the moment, you're looking at, Fortnite or Call of Duty or, those kind of, you jump into a lobby and not really talking to another person unless you're, part of a squad. And even then, you're not developing. I mean, that sounds really shallow. You're not developing really as a human being. You're just kind of like going through the motions of playing a game, which I totally understand. It's like cathartic. It's a release. But there's definitely these people who love these kind of single player games. They want to do something with their friends, and they see TRPGs and they go, "This is something, as you say, that we can connect over, that we can engage in a story together." So yeah, definitely, I think it is part of that idea that you can really talk to anybody. And in all honesty, I think of the games that I've played of TRPGs, only 1 or 2 sessions have actually been in person. I mean, especially at the moment, because we can't really be in person.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how developed the online community of playing online has become.
Definitely, and like how much people have begun to display that pride in what they do, and like of their friends as well. Like you see a lot of them kind of like boosting up their friends and stuff. I think one of the main reasons that you see that is because of the fact that when we play tabletop RPGs, we also self-insert ourselves anyway, even though we know it's a character and it's not actually us. Like when you tell the stories of your table and the things that happened, it's, do you remember when I did? Do you remember when we did? Like it's personal pronouns. It's us. We did that, or you watched me do this, and I watched you do this, rather than my character Billingdon Thistledown the Fourth saw your character Griffingog, the Bone Crusher Orc, jump across this. No, you watched me seduce that guard, and then you went in and like messed up that whole camp, and then we were able to just like move on. Like it's really interesting. It's really interesting when you think about the how it's going.
I know exactly what you mean, and definitely that personal pronouns feels like something. Yeah, it's so much more personal to engage with someone on that level, even when they're portraying a character. And even as you say, like there is a self-insert element, but there is also this element of I'm playing someone who's potentially so very different from I don't have any relevant experience being a pirate or a soldier or a warrior or a wizard, but I can still engage with you and we can have a good time, even though we're basically doing something so different from our actual lives.
Yeah. So the problem is with these adventures, excellent segue, like is that they need what we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to be talking about villains. BBEGs, big bad evil guys or gals, antagonists to the protagonists of us as players, and so we want to talk about stepping into the dark side and talking about like villains. So Oscar, are you mainly a player or a DM?
I am mainly a DM.
Me too. We both carry this cross.
Yes, yeah, and sometimes it really is a cross.
Yeah. So let's go from there first then. So when you start a campaign, I don't know if you've done mostly homebrew or what do you call it? What are they called?
Modules.
There we go, modules. You know when the word just escapes from your head. I don't know if you've done mostly.
I'm sure it's going to happen many times to me in this.
Whether you've done modules or homebrew stuff, but what are the obstacles and the issues that you're going to put in front of your players when you create a campaign?
I think for a lot, while I don't necessarily do it immediately as soon as I'm presented with a character, often I will take a character that's, if I'm doing a module, I'll take a character that is within a setting and try and make them as antagonistic as possible, sometimes to a specific character, sometimes to the whole party. So one of the most recent examples, I was running the Wizards of the Coast module, A Descent into Avernus. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, I've got that. I like it. I think that the Baldur's Gate section needs to fucking do one, but
Definitely, it feels like a weaker developed portion of that of the whole book. I know exactly what you mean. So there's a character in that called Arkan. Is it the Cruel?
Arkan the Cruel, yep.
Yes, yeah. And the way that he's used in that is interesting. But I said, okay, let's try and take this character and let's try and do something a bit more developed with it. My character's already kind of had a bit of an interaction with Tiamat, and they were kind of getting on to, like, maybe he serves Tiamat and all these things that are happening in Avernus. And I had this character one of my players was playing a character who was very, let's say, arrogant. You know, a character that can kind of stroll into a room and think, I am the best, and I'm better than all of you, and I'm better than the rest of the party. And in a way, I began to turn Arkan into this person who's going to try and really goad him and be like, oh, you're the best? Then prove it to me. And inevitably, this level 7 or so character is going to pale in comparison to this NPC, who I'm obviously going to destroy them. Or at the very least, do have a crushing defeat, that leaves you kind of going, well, you really tried your best. And in an interesting way, they came away from that as real people do. The player came away from that interaction and was like, okay, so I really want to fuck Arkan up now. Yeah. I've not learned, as a real person would, I've not learned anything from this experience. My arrogance was not at fault here. he just got lucky, and next time I'm going to face him, he's going to die. And kind of creating those, as an initial example, creating those villains that are really good at getting under the skin of a person, I think is really key in terms of creating a baddie. Like, it needs to be someone who you really hate.
Yeah, I've got one of those at the minute. And I can go into the reasons why, but it's a bit weird. So one of my players is a genie warlock, but his genie patron is his mother.
That's cool.
And she's locked, like, with him, so, like, she's inside his vessel,
right?
Like, part of their, like, curse. And so she's had this, like, they've had, like, this weird connection. So he gave me that, like, thing of, like, she's with me all the time. And I was like, you know what? This is great. So basically I made her, like, the shadow puppet master. Like,
right.
She whispered in his ear, and it got under the skin of my wife, who plays in our game. So this is the Hardy, the air genie. And she's just playing continuous 4D chess to, like, mess with everybody emotionally, including her son. So the latest story arc was the fact that they released her from her curse, and so she was allowed to, like, roam free. And she was like, "Oh well, I'll try and help you." Rah rah rah. And then her idea of helping was trying to marry off Zephyr to multiple other Genasi children to like secure alliances and secure power and footholds everywhere.
Yeah.
And to have grandchildren. Like, she kept making that reference, and she even roped in my wife's character, who's having a bit of a romantic relationship with the Zephyr character, the warlock character. And she was like, "Well, you can be there as well. Like, you're all marrying him together. It's like a harem thing." And like, just how flippant she was about everything, and how she thought, like, everything she said was a good idea. I really got under the skin of almost everyone in the game, like, because, like, Zephyr as well would listen to her most of the time, even though what she said was ridiculous. Like, so you're like, he's like, it wasn't until recently where she finally showed that actually she didn't care for him as much as he thought she did.
Right.
She said the wrong thing, which was, next time, the next one, I'll make it better. Like, and basically try to lock him in a device that was powered via planar blood. And they they destroyed her. They actually like mullered her. Yeah, like they just wanted to. They just like as soon as they saw an opportunity, and they've been waiting for. You could tell they've been waiting for this opportunity for a while. So I think that's a really good point. Making those characters, those bad guys especially, that can get under the skin of either a particular player or all your players for whatever reason, is a really good way to build bad guys. One of the ways that I've quite like is I like bad guys who believe that they're the good guy. I'm a sucker for that type of or believe their own hype. So for example, one of the things like I would probably mess about with Archon for is that Archon believes that even though Tiamat's an evil goddess and everything like that, he believes he's doing what he was meant to do. Like, I've devoted my whole life to this, so that almost like self-belief that he can't fail because of the fact it's one of the ways. There's two ways I play Strahd. I kind of play Strahd like that as well. I would play Strahd like that. Sorry.
Yeah.
The fact that Strahd knows he's too big to fail. Like,
yeah, absolutely. That's such a great phrase. Too big to fail. I love that.
Yeah, like because I either play him that way or I play him tired and old, but he has to at least look like he's trying.
Yes, I like that. That's so funny. Oh god, yeah. Okay. So what I will say is, going back to that mother character, I'll just talk about that for a few. I don't mean to derail us a little bit back, but I will. I was going to say, and that's such a great idea too, because everybody, whether you actually have a person like that in your life, like a parent or an overbearing relative, everybody can somewhat relate to that character. Someone who, whether you've engaged in it in media or in real life, someone who kind of pressures you to do or be something. And then, you're talking about that son character, the player, having that idea that they just do what their mum says because they think it's the right thing. It's like, my mum's not going to tell me to do the wrong thing because they support me and they want the best for me. And that's such a brilliant idea that you're presenting there of this person. In a way, that player almost becomes a baddie because they're believing in what the villain says. They believe that this is the right thing to be doing. This is the right way I should be moving forward with my life. And it's one of, like you say, one of the most effective ways to get under people's skin because they see that and they go, you're making the wrong decisions. Why can't you see that this person is bad? Or like initially you think, okay, maybe this person is a good person, and you have to slowly realize that they're not. And then talking about characters who believe they're good, there's a great phrase. Nobody does something because sorry, I've got a bit lost there. Everyone believes they're doing the right thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. Unless, you just accept that you're an awful human being.
But everyone's protagonists in their own story, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So when you have these characters, especially when you're designing a villain, you have to be kind of looking at it and going, why are they actually doing that? People don't do horrible things because they like to be horrible. They do it for a reason. They're doing it so that they can achieve some goal that is right to them. And it has to make sense on some level. Yeah,
nuance, isn't it? Like that idea of even liches. Like, liches don't want to die because they're scared or they've got a goal that is going to exist past their lifetime. So they become liches for that reason. Like, I am afraid of dying. Like, or I have something I need to do. Therefore, so those reasons lead on. Yeah. So I also never thought of the angle that most people have that. Like, I knew that for my wife because of our lives and our circumstances, our context about the overbearing parent. But I never thought of like, actually, no, everybody's got that person in their lives who listens to somebody who's no good for them. Like, even if it's just like a girlfriend or a friend, and you're like, and they're like, oh, they're not that bad really. Like, once you get to know them and you get to know them, and you realise that the bodies are piling up in the corner.
Yeah. How many
Like,
skeletons are there in the closet? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But yeah.
Well, I have a question for you then, if that's all right. I know
No,
I'm the guest and you're the host, but I
no,
have a
you
question
go for
you.
it.
Who is your favorite villain? And it can be your own, or it can be from like popular media. But I'd be interested to know who your favorite is, or like when you think of villains, who jumps out in your mind immediately.
Ooh. I've got like the entire Final Fantasy villain cast in my head. I think in terms of like popular media, my favorite villain ever is probably, I think it's the version of Long John Silver from Treasure Planet.
From the animated film.
Yeah, the Treasure Planet, the animated film from Disney, the like cult classic one, because of the fact that like you'll if you know the story of Treasure Island, you are fully prepared for Long John Silver to be a bastard and to be horrible and to like betray you. But then in Treasure Planet, somehow he still manages to be like nice, and you like him, and he's charismatic, and he's patient, and he's not he's greedy, but he's not evil. Like until and then towards the third act, you're like, oh no, he's genuinely terrible. Even when he lets Jim go at certain points, you're like, no, you're just he's like one of my favorite villains because of the nuance of him, and like the I quite liked a controversial hot take on like comic book bad guys. I liked the villainous turn of Cyclops in the X-Men after Avengers versus X-Men and after like Utopia and stuff, and he's far more like militant because there was no other way he could go. Like he'd fought for so long for like a world that hates and fears him, and he's done it all, and he keeps trying, and then M-Day happens where Scarlet Witch gets rid of like tons of mutants, and he's just like, what? Why do people keep doing this? Why? Like we've got, because he even says, I think at one point, like, we're okay when they come from space, and we're okay when they've got walking tanks on them, and we're okay when they transform into green rampaging monsters and kill people. However, if you're born with wings, suddenly you're a threat and a menace. And like he goes on about like, and he like calls out loads of people. He calls out Spider-Man, Captain America, calls Captain America a hypocrite, which I always love because I hate Captain America with every fibre of my being. And just his villainous turn and like how people reacted to that. I was like, there was no other way he could go. He'd done like Righteous Soldier. He'd done that for years, and everything that happened just proved him wrong. And then it was kind of like the best way to put it was like when you oath break Paladin finally, when you go, fuck this, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep up with the battering that you're giving me. So yeah, Cyclops was probably my favorite like comic book villain. And then just in terms of like the nuance of him, like Long John Silver from Treasure Planet. Honorable shout out to the people from Atlantis as well. The Lost Empire. That was because they kind of had that same Long John Silver-esque thing, but because you didn't know the story, like you were more shocked by it when you first watched it. What about you? Who's your like favorite villain? That let's do, and then we'll talk about our favorite ones that we've ever created. Yeah. So do like popular like culture or something like that. Your favorite villain?
I think there's a couple of really good ones. I think it would be a real cop out to just say Darth Vader. But I think in terms of iconography and the fact that really, if you talk about the episodes 1 through 6, the story is about Anakin and Darth Vader and that fall from grace, and then kind of that redemption at the very end well, I guess the bare minimum of redemption.
Yeah.
In terms of, I wouldn't necessarily say a villain, but Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh yeah, spicy. I like it.
I think
Go.
I think he kind of has. Obviously, we love him for the fact that he is at the very beginning of the story, obviously so captured with this idea of like, if I do this one thing, then my life is going to be set. And that's a perfect example, for any kind of villain to say, all you need to do is this one thing, and your life will be as brilliant, better than it was before. You will win your father's approval. You will win the hearts and minds of the people who surround you. And Zuko, he has all this trauma, like his mother disappears in the night and he never finds out what happens to her, and his father is this cruel, uncaring man, and in turn he becomes this cruel and uncaring figure, even without really realizing what that means. Ozai, Zuko's dad, is cruel because he's an emperor who's trying to expand his nation. He's trying to take over the world. Whereas Zuko just sees that and mirrors it without really even understanding what it means. He's just a teenager who's literally been sent out into the world to do this impossible, or quote unquote impossible, task. And when we finally see him overcome that, it reminds us as people, many of the people who've watched that will think, I have trauma, and that can potentially turn you or anybody into a bad person. But when we look at the things that have happened to us and say, we're better than that, we can be on the right side of this situation, it reminds us that just because you've been hurt doesn't mean you have to fall all the way down. You can stand tall and fight, not necessarily fight in an aggressive sense, but you can go against everything that you have experienced in order to become a better person. And I think that's what we find so endearing about Zuko. He has that redemption because he fights for it, and he is a good person on the inside.
Yeah, you see that throughout the series, don't you? Like those little moments where you go, oh no, Zuko could be good. Like how he speaks to Iroh, and like when he at one point he gives up the chase for Aang, doesn't he? Because his men are falling off the ship or something like that. I can't remember. And he like grabs them and he's like, no, and he thinks about it for a second. And you're like very much waiting for him to just carry on chasing Aang, but instead he stops to save these like random soldier A and random soldier B. And you get that, and then I think what perfectly helps Zuko's narrative block, even though this is where during his transition towards being more of a good person, is then you're introduced to Azula, who is the perfectly evil version of what Zuko became. Like you see what Zuko could be, and then what Zuko is, and you're like, okay, I've got you. Like, and like. Yeah, you go first.
I think Iroh definitely, like, I hadn't even mentioned Iroh, but the fact that, as I was saying, like, moving on from like a trauma and trying to be that type of person, Iroh is the perfect figure to say, like, I support you. You are a person who I'm trying to help. Iroh can see all the things, even though he's like almost like a war general who's probably killed countless people in his time at war. Iroh still somehow manages to see through that and say, I know I've done bad things and I've accepted that in myself and I'm going to try and be better. And now I see you going down the path that I've seen my brother go down, and I want you to be better because I know that you have a good spirit. I know that you can do the right thing. You can be better than Ozai.
Have you ever, so in media and stuff like that, this is a kind of like an extension of this question that I wanted to ask you, but then you turned it on me.
No, go on.
How the turns have tabled. Have you ever thought of like an unconventional bad guy in popular media that you've went, actually you wouldn't normally see them or that thing as the bad guy itself? So I'll start. I can start for like because I know this is a weird question.
No,
so recently, me and my wife have just watched. I've rewatched, and I showed my wife the anime Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash. Okay,
I can't say I've ever seen it, but go on, tell me a little bit about it.
It's basically like D&D Downtime, the anime. So it doesn't actually focus a lot on like the fighting and stuff like that, but it focuses on the moments between and like living. So the protagonists wake up in like this tower, like without memories of who they are or what they were, and then they go out and they're basically in this fantasy land, on like the frontier of this fantasy land where they've got to fight monsters. And actually, the bad guy of that show, there's no like big bad guy yet. They mention like this undying king or something, but he's so far removed that you've not encountered him or anything.
Yeah.
But the bad guy of that show is Grimgar itself. Like the world itself is harsh. Like you will starve to death if you do not go out and fight monsters. Like, but even one goblin, there's like 5 or 6 of these like teenagers, and like one goblin is like too hard for them to like. And it's like scary because they realize like one of them gets really badly hurt from this goblin, and he starts freaking out because like, oh, what the, like, I thought these guys were supposed to be easy, like, and like when they do finally kill a goblin, they go like, they start like throwing up and stuff. So the situation is the bad guy in that circumstance. Like the fact that like no living thing wants to die is what somebody says in that anime, which I think is a really powerful.
Yeah, like, really powerful.
Yeah, like no living thing wants to die, no matter if it's bad, good, whatever. So like, have you ever thought of anything like that that can be like constituted as like the villain of like an idea or an unconventional villain?
Definitely. I think perhaps one of the ones that we see most constantly in what you would say, if we're talking about like Western media, like addiction, I think is one of the is a really good example. Like, and not just addiction to substances or addiction to I'm trying to think, or addiction to an idea, but the addiction to things like power, and having, even if it's just like a MacGuffin, and it's like, oh, there's this thing far away that you can have if you really wanted it, and the thing that it drives people to do. I think, I don't know if I have a specific example for that, but maybe even something like very literally addiction. I don't know if you've seen Trainspotting.
Oh yeah. Choose Life.
Yeah, where you have these people who are all under the very same circumstances, and they're all addicted to, heroin. And we see them all react in different ways. Some turn to this kind of, they essentially are living a terrible life, and they realize that. And it's not because of something someone has done to them, it's what this substance has done to themselves. So I think definitely when you have an idea, and it's in many ways like, the villain of that story is the drugs, or even to go further is their addiction to that substance, their personality types that bring them to go further into that lifestyle of, I'm wanting to have my next hit and I want to live that life.
Because there's times when even positive like addiction, what you would deem as positive addictions, like wanting to help people, turns into like the villain, because you start helping people at the cost of the character starts helping at the cost of themselves. So like, I can't remember what it was, but there was like a film or something where this like night guy goes around and he like helps people, and eventually like he starts losing like limbs and stuff, but he can't stop. He knows he can't stop.
Right.
And if he does, no one else is going to do it because it's hard. And he's like addicted to that idea of like, I'm the only one who can do it. So even though he's doing something noble, the villain of that thing is like, he's just stuck in this perpetual thing of violence, and like he's got like a false arm and a false leg by the end, and it's like, the next thing he fights is going to kill him because he's nowhere near.
And I think that's essentially that is sometimes what creates a villain. That's what constitutes a villain. It's that they feel like they have to do something. Like, I'm trying to think. Have you seen Breaking Bad?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I'm trying to think if I can say it without spoiling too much. Obviously, Walter White becomes obsessed with making more money. Like, and near the end, he's doing it just because he can.
Yeah.
Because there's more in it for him, and he, like you say, it's like almost a depiction of workaholicism, like thinking that you have to be doing more and more so you can make more money, so that you can have a better life. When essentially you've gone beyond even your initial aspirations. You are far beyond what you thought you could do, and you're doing it now just because you can.
Yeah, you don't need to do it anymore. Like, he didn't need to do it anymore. Like, multiple characters like kept telling him, like, you don't need to do this anymore. You could stop tomorrow and be set for life. And he's just like, it's almost like the have you ever heard of the Grecian concept of the fatal flaw?
I definitely have, yeah.
So for those of you listening, like, the Greeks in their legends and myths made it so every character had something called a fatal flaw, whether it was the hero, the villain, and that fatal flaw was something that would lead to their downfall no matter what. So for example, Achilles' fatal flaw is his self-belief that he is invincible, not realizing that actually an arrow to the heel is going to kill him. Odysseus and his thing of like his single-mindedness to get back home from the Trojan War in the Odyssey is like, yeah, like, you can't do that. It's not that simple. So they all have like a fatal flaw, and I think that one of the things that happens with villains is that their fatal flaw consumes them.
Yeah.
So with Heisenberg, it's almost like pride by that point. It's like, but I can, so I will. Like, because I've got rid of everyone else, and rah rah rah. If sorry, it's Breaking Bad has been around for what?
Yeah, no, I don't think we're really in the territory to be saying spoiler warning for Breaking Bad. If you haven't seen Breaking Bad, just watch it.
But yeah, like, he's got rid of people who have said that they'll get rid of him, and he's just yeah. His fatal flaw becomes pride. He's like, I've done it though. I've done it before. I'll do it again. And so yeah, it just becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. So that's a good point, I think.
And also, I think what's powerful about, if we're going to call Walter White a villain, which I think wouldn't be inaccurate, the idea that every hurdle he leaps over sets up the next hurdle. Every time he does something outlandish to get himself out of something is the next time someone notices and goes, okay, this is something we have to deal with. And that is a really interesting idea of villain. You know, someone who thinks that by, like a domino effect, you've just done the tiniest thing to get the tiniest goal, and it's blown itself up into something where it's like, you have to be killing people, you have to be starting wars, you have to be going all the way out there to achieve what was essentially a very small goal at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. There's a few like popular figures that we can think about with that, aren't there now? We can go for him. You can go for Anakin, if we go back to the Darth Vader thing. Like, I want to save my wife. Like, is essentially what that boils down to. Like, I want to save my wife. However, shouldn't have wife in first place. So the fact that he's doing these things brings about the idea that everybody starts going, well, you have a wife apparently. Like, or what are you doing? Why are you acting so strangely? Because he's got to keep this a secret.
Yeah.
And then when somebody comes along with the idea of like, if you do this for me, I can teach you how to save your wife. He then does terrible things and those to get that short-term goal, which everybody goes, what the hell are you doing? Stop! Stop! And it just perpetually goes on and on, doesn't it? To like, every time he achieves one of his short-term goals, something else happens that then
sets up the next
in this place. It's interesting. It is interesting. So if we were to talk about now, we've talked about our favorite villains in like media, and we've talked about some things that we wouldn't say that they were villains, but they basically are. So gone a bit metaphysical and philosophical on it. What's one of your favorite villains that you've ever ran in a tabletop RPG game, and like why did it work so well?
So one of the campaigns that I'm running at the moment, so I'm, as a writer, I'm currently writing 2 5e modules that I'm hoping to publish. And I guess I'll kind of like talk about the 2 and kind of give a bit of comparison, if that's all right. I know you only asked for 1, but
no, that's fine.
So the idea behind one of the ones I'm running at the moment is this villain who's just constantly on your case. I designed this character who, without spoiling what I'm potentially hoping to publish one day too much, it's essentially that the idea of this character rocks up to your village one day and kills everyone and leaves you for dead, basically. But you're alive, and that was their intention, and now you're out to get revenge for that. And in order to do that, you're going to have to go on a classic adventure and build up your powers and learn how to face against this evil. And obviously, there are many ways to play that, but the best way that I've felt about it is just this character that can constantly appear and just harass you. Not in a physical, violent sense, but this character just kind of appears and is like, yeah, you shouldn't be doing that. Or going, yeah, I think you're making the wrong decision there. Or essentially questioning you, similar to your genie character, constantly meddling with the things that you're doing. Or maybe even saying, you know, if you gave into the dark side, I could help you destroy these people if they're in your way and they're bothering you. And it's funny when you create a character like that who's kind of charming and witty and also really bad and sees it's very pragmatic. Like, I can just do this if you just gave into the dark side and wanted to be bad. It's funny when your players say, I really like this guy. And it's like, well, he's trying to bring about an age of darkness.
Yeah.
And then in comparison with this character that's so present, another campaign, so that's kind of traditional fantasy style setting. The one that I'm writing or looking to publish very soon is kind of like noir fantasy, where you have this kind of 1920s, 1930s, 1940s megacity like New York, and there's gangsters and private detectives and kind of that vibe, noir fantasy. And the villain is just kind of like what you were saying about that anime, where the villain is just so far away and so mysterious that it almost feels like they're not present, and yet everything that's happening can be attributed to them.
Yeah.
Like, you have no idea who's doing all these things, but every day you wake up and something new has happened. Every day someone has died, someone's gone missing, something has happened. And the contrast between those two has been really interesting as a writer, to say, you know, sometimes a villain can be really in your face and be really there and present and pushing you. And other times it can be a total mystery and they want nothing to do with you. And you are just a piece of many pieces within their game. And they don't really need to mess around with you. They just need to get you out of their way before they move on to the next thing. So I think the idea of making villains like that is really interesting, especially in the concept of, you know, how their relationship is with the protagonists, in this case, you know, the players.
Yeah. And I think it's very cool that you've got two very different approaches to that. Like, one, like you said, one who is present almost always in the back of the players' minds because they've met them, and like they've had their inciting incident with them, and rah rah rah. Whereas the other one, it's just like this person exists apparently, like, and it's all their fault. What do? Like,
Yeah.
That's interesting. I like that. Mine is actually, it's not even like the big bad evil guy, but it's like a mid boss,
Mhm.
and his name is Grelin Prigby.
Cool.
And Grelin is so in my world, my own homebrew world, it's called the Isle of Ramph so far, and it's going to be expanded. I've decided to make like this island, and basically what happens every 4 years on this island is like 3 months of nighttime just happens, and nobody understands why or what. And what this basically allows to happen is like all your drow, Durgar, things that go bump in the night, the planes tear, like it's all centered around Ramph. So Ramph is this hard place where every 4 years a lot of people are going to die, right? So people are grizzled, and basically there's this thing called the sun shields. Every town or city on Ramph has one, has a dawn bastion where these sun shields are, and everybody must serve in the sun shields at some point. They must serve at least 2 shays, so 8 years in the dawn shields from the age of 14 upwards,
Right.
because life expectancy is not long.
Yeah.
So Grelin Prigby is the leader of the first dawn bastion that most of my adventures start in. And he is corrupt as hell. People think he's gone what in the setting they call Shay mad, which is basically he's seen so many of these like moon shays that he's gone crazy. Like he's lazy, he's corrupt, he's a drunkard, he's abusive. You can find out throughout the story or as you're exploring this village that he has like a nephew who's a fire genasi, who's actually my first ever D&D character. I inserted with an NPC.
Cool.
And basically, you notice that they don't get along very well, even though Kindling, the fire genasi, is like is the tactician, and he's the one who's actually in control and in command.
Right.
But he won't step above his uncle, and it's because his uncle's abused him all his life. And he's just a terrible man. And one of the things that I really like about Grelin is the fact that not only is he that archetypical person who abuses their power, but he's also someone who you don't know how to fight against, because yes, you could kill him, sure, but then everybody turns against you.
Yeah, he represents an authority that people respect. Yeah,
and he's a terrible person, and he's terrible to the party in most of the games that I've ran him in. Like you realize that he's fixed the lottery so there's also a lottery system to get drafted if there's not enough soldiers, and he rigs the lottery all the time,
right?
Like to get rid of undesirables. You find that out in like the first session. And yeah, he's just a terrible person. And I love the fact that like you can't. One of the things that I love about him is that you can't tell anyone that you're like, he's a terrible person. Everybody's like, I know, but he is necessary. Like, and they're like, oh shit, what do we do then? Like, because like even Kindling, who would love to kill him, like for the things that he's done to him, like wants to burn him alive.
Yeah,
like will not, because he knows that what happens then, like it's a like, so most of the time people just leave him alone. And like I would love for them to go back and things be even worse or something. Like I've never had the opportunity to go back because most people just leave him alone, and it's like it's almost like the evil you can't beat is bureaucracy, and like like and I just like him.
That's such a powerful idea as well, because often, you know, when we talk about villains like that, you know, you might argue is lawful evil. I would feel confident to say it's lawful evil. You know, someone who's using their power in a lawful way to
get what they
corrupt.
want. Yeah.
To get what they want. Often we think of those characters as really cunning and conniving and kind of like secretive, and they write secret missives and stuff, and no one really knows what they're doing. Whereas that character is very much like everybody knows that he's bad, but they just can't talk about it. He's not trying to hide. Well, he may be. Obviously, in some levels, he may be trying to hide those things. Don't let me say anything about the way you put a character description in your mouth. But
no, there were blatantly certain things that he hides. Like he would never come out and say that he used to lock kindling in a cupboard for days on end. Like and one of the special things about that cupboard is that he would then throw daggers at the door.
Oh god.
Like, because he hates this kid. Like he just in a almost like racist way, because of the fact that he's a Genasi, and like how Genasi are formed in Ramp is that basically you make a pact with certain things to get their offspring. So Tieflings, Azamar, Genasi, you have to make a deal with those things. And so he knows that whatever kindling did, or whatever deal was made with kindling's elemental mother or being, that it has somehow robbed him of his brother. Like that he blames him for his brother disappearing. So yeah, he would never mention that. So you're right, there are certain things that he's like, I do not want this to get out. However, there are other things where he's just like, I don't care. He's almost like a necessary evil. Like
but that what I was saying is like the idea that he is corrupt and everybody knows, and obviously that's something that happens in life, but it's so rare that we see that so well put in a TRPG, where often those characters are secretive and you only really find out that they're evil right in the moment that they stab you in the back. But that idea of this person's necessary and they need, and really someone should take care of them. Not in like the kind sense, in terms of we need to get them out of this position of power, because someone who's, especially when you have someone who has the capability to do that job without them. I mean, that's very powerful, I think, to have that opportunity to say, and especially when you're talking about, if you leave him alone, something bad's going to happen. You will regret never standing up to that person, because they were right there, they were right within your grasp, and you didn't do anything because you were worried about what would happen, and now look at what's happened.
And that's why kindling's there as well. It's almost like the Azula Zuko comparison. Like, you could see someone who is more than capable, clever enough, good enough, like would not abuse that position underneath someone who is doing that and is like ruining people's lives, like sending them off to their death. And he's just like, I can't unthrone him. That's not how this works. Like, so yeah, he's a really interesting villain that I would love to get the opportunity to like mess about with a bit more. And like that's one of the reasons why I was at one point I was writing the Ramp like adventure that I had in my
cool.
But I gave up on it and I lost all the files, so I was like, damn it.
Oh no, that's devastating.
Yeah, because I had like him. So there's that whole thing with him, and it basically ends up with you inside one of the cities, which has like massive walls. And it turns out that during the Moonshay, which all this happens in, so you've got this 3 months of like perpetual nighttime and darkness. They lock all the walls, but what they don't realize is that the werewolves are already inside the walls.
Right.
So like when it goes in continually dark with a full moon, it's like, oh no, like we're locked in here with a bunch of werewolves. Like oh shit. So yeah, it can be really interesting. Is there ever been a time where you thought, and this can be in a tabletop RPG or in like popular media, where you thought like a villain was poorly executed?
Oh. Are you ready for my controversial opinion?
Go for it.
I think having a villain that you can understand the side of is overplayed, and we need to go back to a time where we can hate our villains and not understand their perspective.
Fair enough.
So this is, I think it's been used really well and the most recent time it happened. I can tell you're a fan of comics. Have you seen the new Marvel films?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine you've seen Infinity War and Endgame as well.
Yeah.
I think Thanos is just such an interesting character, and in the comics, he is actually evil. He wants to do something because he wants to win Death's favor, right? He wants to gather the Infinity Stones and destroy half of all existence to basically get this girl to like him. And that's a really evil idea. That someone becomes so obsessed with someone that it's like you didn't even know if that's gonna make her like him. He's just doing it because he thinks it might.
Yeah. Whereas he's not even asked her. He's like the ultimate like jilted Chad or whatever. Like,
yeah, exactly. And then in the films, it's like my people died because they couldn't handle resources properly. So I'm going to kill half of everybody so that then society can thrive. And it's funny because at no point does anybody, obviously none of the Avengers are going to be like, well, we don't care that you want to save everyone. None of them would ever address that. Of course, Doctor Strange is kind of like, well, yeah, that's really tragic for you, but you're going the wrong way. But no one ever is kind of like, no one has that moment of, you're right, things should be different, but you're wrong. And it's the same, it's kind of similar with often the Magneto stories are often about mutants are underrepresented, or mutants are being hurt by humans, so we have to kill all the humans. And Professor X has to go, well, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
I agree that mutants aren't being treated properly, but we don't have to kill all humans to do it.
No.
That idea of they're doing the right thing but in the wrong way, I think has run its course.
My example of this, I've got an example of this, is that when they did the live action Maleficent films.
I haven't seen them, but I know of them. Yeah, they definitely
made my piss boil. Like I was genuinely infuriated throughout the whole thing because Maleficent, like, her name is literally magnificently evil.
Yeah,
like malevolent and magnificent put together. Like, you're kind of there, like, what?
Yeah,
like,
why are we making this character endearing?
Yeah, like, and like, oh, they stole my wings. I'm like, you're a powerful sorceress. Like, just grow them back. Like, and this is you can transform into a dragon apparently with wings. Like, and because with the Thanos thing as well, I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then I realized, hang on, if he can wipe out half the universe,
why not just add more stuff?
Yeah, like, why not just make a post-scarcity society? Like, I don't. That's also a thing. Like, and he's like, nah. But which is why, like, that also like made my jimmies wrestle when you mentioned the fact that Thanos wanted deaths, because nobody knows that. When I talk to them, I'm like, oh yeah, Thanos is kind of cool, but it's better when he does this, and they're like, what? Like, I'm like, oh yeah. And like not Gamora, Nebula ends Infinity War, like in the comic books. Spoiler alert for almost 30-year-old comic book now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're wanting spoiler alerts on old Infinity War, then come on.
Yeah, and they literally trick her, don't they? They say like, oh well, do you know what would be the best like middle finger to Thanos? If you just got rid of everything he ever did, and she does it, and which gets rid of her as well, and they then have the Infinity Gauntlet and all the Infinity Stones and shit. They're just like, haha, like, yeah, I do believe like that. This I can see what you're saying about the whole, because they kind of, the thing with Loki as well, and the fact that he can't decide whether he's a good guy or a bad guy.
Yeah,
that's something I'm getting quite annoyed with, like the whole anti-hero swing.
Yeah,
like
I think
like sometimes people are just bad, and like, yeah, they might not realize that they're bad, but being selfish, being greedy, being insecure, like being power hungry or wanting more for yourself is makes you bad sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's not it doesn't even have to be understandable. Like, some people genuinely can't understand why other people have to tread on others to get on top of the ladder, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
I think the best version of that, like, people not understanding why somebody can do that, is Peter Baelish. Like, nobody liked him in Game of Thrones. Like, nobody liked him, but they like the same thing, necessary evil. But then eventually, when he runs his course, they're like, yeah, we're done with you now.
Yeah.
Like, and they get rid of him because of the fact that he is just evil. Like, he is just a terrible person, and there's nothing to understand.
Interestingly, to compare with Thanos, it's interesting how we can say that, you know, that version of Thanos is more objectively evil and we don't see the other side of things. And Peter Baelish, they're both two guys who really wanted a girl, and then they just became really horrible people because of it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the most powerful thing that I realized, you know, I obviously, because I'm talking to you about it now, I'm obsessed with like designing villains and understanding how to get into the head of someone who is essentially evil, not just to the surroundings, but to an audience member.
Oh yeah.
And I think the most powerful thing that I realized once, you know, when I thought about, you know, creating baddies, is the people we hate in real life, rarely do we think about the good things that they do. Rarely do we think, oh, that's why they're doing that. We don't know their origin story. We don't know the origin story of our, I don't know, abusive partner. Well, maybe we might, but we don't know the origin story of one of our friends' friends who kind of says horrible things about you. We don't know the origin story of our school bully, or, you know, people who treat us like shit in real life. Rarely do we know what their reasoning behind that is. And we might be more sympathetic towards them if we did. But the idea that we hate them and they are a villain in our lives because we don't know. We don't see their side of things.
And
And
I think, I think you're right. I think you're right on that. Like, we don't need to always know either. Like, think about the effect that those people have had on us. Like or on the people that they've hurt or whatever. Like, we can objectively turn around and go, well, being abusive is just being abusive. Like, and it is bad. Like, you don't have to be like, oh well, this happened to them and this happened to them. It's like, no, there's a line. Like, the law says that if they do this, there's a consequence. Like, and I think you're right. Like, sometimes we make villains over relatable, if that's a word.
Yeah, and I think often people champion that by saying, well, otherwise they wouldn't make sense. Did villains not make sense before? Before we had this renaissance of having villains be relatable and understandable, did we not understand them? Did they not seem realistic? I think that argument doesn't really ring true. Everyone says that or a lot of people say that good villain design is creating a villain who's relatable because it makes them more realistic. It makes you feel more of an emotion towards them. But I think the strongest emotion you want to feel towards a villain is hate, unless you want them to have a redemption, or perhaps have a hero have a redemption before they kill them. You know, like going, do you know what? I think I've been absorbed by my anger, so I'm not going to strike you down. Like, and we're going to lock you up instead.
I think, yeah, you go first. Sorry, you keep going.
The final point is, you want to feel hate for a villain. And it's very difficult to do that when you always in the back of your mind you're going, well, they're kind of doing something that is technically good, and really all they need to do is be educated about why they're doing things wrong. Anyway, go on.
My villain that I think is poorly executed, and this is going to be a really hot take. Like,
Go on.
So
Go on. I completely forgot that I was answering that question. We really got absorbed in that.
We got into. So
give me your example.
I genuinely prefer Darth Vader before the redemption arc. Yeah. I think that his redemption arc was not earned, like in the slightest.
No.
Like I don't think it was earned in the slightest in terms of as a writer. Like I think it was rushed and poor. Like, oh, so I threw the Emperor down one shoot. Like, but the millions of people that I've helped enslave and. Oh, do you remember that planet that I facilitated the blowing up of? It's fine now. We're just going to forget that. Like, do you remember when I invaded an independent colony of just workers who had never done me any harm just to capture 4 people? Oh, okay. Sorry. Like, yeah, I genuinely think that Darth Vader beforehand, when you meet him in the first corridor where he's just this giant, imposing, like, ability to, like, choke you out with just looking at you, and that breathing wheeze is, like, so good. Yeah. And then they kind of went, so Darth Vader's Luke's dad. And everybody just went, what? And then,
I mean, that's interesting enough. I don't think that I know exactly what you mean in terms of the redemption end. I don't think finding out his father is the worst thing. I think. No, go on, you continue.
It's just the fact that it's just like I'm talking about in terms of as a writer. Yeah. You got that idea of like that bombshell hit, and they had no idea where to go after that. Like they went because hang on, because they literally must have like written that whole fight sequence. And then went, oh, by the way, Luke's dad is Darth Vader, and they're just there like he's literally just chopped Donnie's hand off. What do you want us to do here? It's like, oh yeah, just carry on. Like Darth Vader, in terms of just how I don't think he, and then the other bad villain, I think this is going to be a niche one. So that's my hot take one.
Okay,
and then
that's definitely a hot take, but I definitely agree.
My other one is Zayanor from Kingdom Hearts.
Yes! Sorry,
Zayanor is such a bad villain because you have no idea what the fuck is going on. Like, his plan is so overly complicated.
Maybe
like,
if you've played 0.2 Birth by Dreams... okay, the thing is, redacted, recoded, final mix, 0.3.
Yeah.
Then you'll understand what's going on.
Because I've played every single Kingdom Hearts game, every single one, watched every single cinematic, like read up on it. Like I fucking loved Kingdom Hearts. And then when Kingdom Hearts 3 came along, I was just like, what? like sorry?
They definitely began to strain the idea of what was actually happening. I think one of my very close friends introduced me to Kingdom Hearts only very recently. Like as 3 was like coming out, I played through all of them, and I immediately became like totally captured because it's an incredible game series. And I think, in 3, the thing that confused me the most is like, so they have these bodies, and then the spirits of people can then go into the bodies, but then so Roxas just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah,
what?
Yeah, that whole we've got these strange bodies that people from the past can jump into the future and go into. And I'm like, hang on. So Roxas Xion comes back. Just all these people come back to you. Like.
But then where is so the thing that we're going to gush about this for a minute. That scene where Roxas returns just as a beam from the sky. I'm like, but where's the body though? Did they give the body to Roxas and he just hadn't shown up until now, or in that moment did the body go to him and then he gets shot out of the sky?
I have no idea because I'm also there like Roxas doesn't exist. Roxas doesn't exist. Because if you've got Ventus, who is apparently why Roxas looks the way he does, and you've got Zora, who is who Roxas is made from, then Roxas cannot. I was just like, and I'm like, there, I want him back. He was like my boy. I fucking loved that kid when I first met him in Kingdom Hearts 2. I was like, I will protect him with everything I have. I've known this boy for 2 hours, but if anything happened to him, I'd kill everyone in this building and then myself.
Yes,
And then, like, I just like, why did you do my boy like that? Like, yeah, like it. So my hot take is Darth Vader didn't earn his redemption arc, and then like you can get into the whole General Snoke thing as well. Like, yeah.
I mean, yeah. Okay, yeah. Go on. We'll talk about that in a second.
But the other one is my other like big fucked up villain that just didn't go well was Zayanor. Like, what? Why? Like what the hell?
I think
it was just so weird.
Knowing that my friend who really likes Kingdom Hearts is listening, I will probably have to think very carefully about what I'm about to say. I think Zayanor is so interesting, but is that really only because he's so complicated?
Yeah, he's like a Rubik's Cube. Everybody is fascinated with Rubik's Cubes. Everybody thinks that they're cool, like because they're like this really what should be simple, but is complicated. But there is an art to it, and Xehanort's like that. Like Xehanort wants to unlock infinite power through the use of Kingdom Hearts, which is the collective emotion and memory of the universe.
Yeah, let's explain it for the listeners. Let's go through the whole thing. So basically, Zayanor was this guy. Okay,
no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. But yeah, so he wants that, and that's it. That's apparently supposed to be it. And then time travel gets involved, body swapping, like the fact that he used to be an old man but is no longer an old man. The fact
and then somehow returns to being an old man.
The fact that there's like 15 of him, like 15 different versions of him, including his younger self, who could always time travel. So that kind of makes old man Xehanort pointless, because if he could always time travel, why would he be his old horrible self when he's not at his prime? Like you would use your younger self, you'd be younger. Like it jumped the shark, didn't it? It jumped the shark pretty. Yeah. So what were you going to say about the Snoke stuff?
It's just shit. Why? Okay, well, here's the thing, and this is something I want to break down a little bit just before I go into talking about whole Snoke. One of the reasons that I'm so interested in telling stories is because I like to see what's good, and about designing villains and about anything, is I like to see what's good in something that's objectively, or well, how it's been received is really terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And now this is a really hot take. I actually think The Last Jedi is quite good. Okay, now before we go any further than that, I think it's good for a number of reasons, and none of them are Snoke. But Snoke just really, it's a poor use of Andy Serkis's talents. First of all,
not even just in terms of anything else.
Yeah,
one actor.
Okay. Andy Serkis going to be a lot better used in Star Wars, and to put him on Snoke was it seems like, what is the point?
Yeah, he literally had no.
We get no back. Like, okay, I get they kind of explain it in Rise of Skywalker. But even then, that explanation is just shit.
He's like a failed Palpatine clone or whatever. Like,
spoiler alert for Rise of Skywalker. If you haven't seen that, then you're not missing out on much.
Yeah. The thing is, The Last Jedi is a great war film, but it's a terrible Star Wars film.
That's an interesting take. I think if you'd never been given the chance to care about what Star Wars was about, but you knew what Star Wars was, I think you would enjoy the Last Jedi. I think it has all the cool things that Star Wars can be cool. Like, it has the interesting space battles, and it has a really, in my opinion, the best lightsaber fight ever in that throne room. Oh yeah, no, that is dope. With those guards and the fact that they can change their weapons and stuff, and they have to like throw their lightsabers to each other at one point. Yeah, and stuff like that. Better choreographed than, and I think that's the peak of lightsaber choreography. Really, you have some interesting stuff in Rise of Skywalker, but like The Last Jedi is where I think that throne room scene is at its peak. And there's just something so whimsical about when the Falcon comes in at the end on Crate and it's, destroying all these TIE fighters and the Millennium Falcon music plays. And I'm just like, oh, I love this. I remember now why I like Star Wars.
Mm.
But in terms of actual story, I think it just kind of begins to fall apart, I think. And I think that's what everyone has a big problem with it is just the story just doesn't really take you anywhere.
It's full of spectacle moments, like that bit on that planet where they've got those skimmer things that kick up the red dust. Looks beautiful, looks amazing, but then you're just kind of like, why is this happening again? Like when you come out of that, it's all and then you've got Snoke, who's just for 2 films now has just been someone sat in a chair. Like, I
mean, that's all he remains. This is a dude.
And I get that they were trying to like mimic the Emperor, like that idea of like Palpatine, this foreboding, or is it foreboding, or like bearing down force? Foreboding, like antagonist that's far away because of the fact that you fought Darth Vader. And one of the things that was cool about Palpatine was the fact that you thought Darth Vader was the bad guy. You thought that Darth Vader was in charge for the longest time, and you realized that he had a boss, and you were like, "Oh shit! So what's his boss like?"
Mm-hmm.
Whereas then they just tried to mirror that with Snoke, and it was like, no, no, like, and then again we got that. We understand Kylo Ren gets a redemption story that he again does not earn. Like, I'm like, I know you wanted to be like Darth Vader in all aspects, but like, is this the one? Is this the one you really? Could you not have left this one behind?
And again, Kylo Ren does have the opportunity to be Zuko'd. Like if we're verbing that, if we're Zukoing someone, Kylo Ren had the opportunity to be that, but they didn't either have or put the effort in. Oh, sorry, they didn't have the time, or they didn't put enough effort into trying to make that happen. I understand in a TV series like The Last Airbender, you have hours and hours of episodes to build up the idea that someone has the potential to be good. Whereas in Star Wars, you've got like 9 hours, and that's 3 films, and that's millions of dollars of production value to put towards making the subtlety of making someone feel like they might be good at some point.
Yeah, because like if you just went from Kylo Ren's thing at the end of what's the first one called?
Force Awakens. It's not a good sign that we've forgotten the names.
Like the Force Awakens, like he has that moment, and this is why I don't feel like he earns his redemption. He had that moment. He had that moment where people were like looking towards him, and were like, "Dude, you can stop now. It's fine. We get it. Maybe we were horrible to you," and he still stabs Han Solo. Like he has that opportunity. So in my mind, like. And in most writers' minds, that's the subversion. Like you're subverting that trend of like, oh, this guy's redeemable because you gave him that opportunity and he refused. And then the power of boners happens, and then suddenly, like,
I mean, that's the subversion. If we're saying that most villains become villains because of a girl, then the subversion for this one is that he stops being a villain because of a girl.
Oh god damn it! Like, is it because of shirtless Kylo? That's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, some villains are just bad. Like, and then
not in the good way.
and not in the good way, and sometimes they're not. Like, sometimes a villain is self-aware enough to know that they're not a good villain. Like you can tell in the performance and everything like that, or something like that. Like even in some video games where they have like mid bosses, like the mid boss knows that they're a mid boss almost. Like
I really like that idea. To be fair, that of you just saying that of imagine designing a villain who knows that they're not effective, that they know they're not like perfect, sorry, I've just kind of got a bit distracted there. But the idea that you make someone who is aware that they're not the best they can be, and is kind of trying to grow as much as the protagonists are, in the sense that the protagonists are trying to be as good as they can so that they can defeat this evil. This evil is trying to become as good as it can so that it can stop the rise of the heroes. And to be aware of that is really interesting.
Yeah,
Anyway.
definitely. Yeah, and you can have because then you can have cool moments like when the heroes arrive somewhere, like they realize that all the traps have been triggered. Like all the traps have been triggered. All the enemies are like dead in front of them. Like what happened? And they get to like the treasure room, and the person they're trying to fight is there with what they're there for. Like, oh, hi there. Sorry about this. I'm going to teleport now. Like, like just because I think that would be hilarious. There's like the potential for hilariousness, but also there's the thing of like if you can get them to run away from a couple of fights, like you have those fights where they run away from them, and it's almost like a joke, like, oh, he's turned up again, so we just beat him up quickly.
Very kind of Team Rocket-esque.
Yeah,
where it's like, oh, it's you guys again. Anyway, just get out of our way so that we can keep, trying to do our thing.
Yeah, and then you have that one fight where they have that, and they're like, well, we're way better than we were then. And then suddenly it's like, yeah, you don't hit. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, what? No, yeah, you don't hit. Like, he is now going to cast Disintegrate. What? Like,
yeah.
sorry. That would be really cool. I want to incorporate that. We need to like work on something like that and publish that together.
Yes.
That'd be sick.
Yeah, I would love that.
Like because you could give them like a ridiculous name as well, like the Misadventures of Boomerang or something. Like, because they just keep coming back.
Somebody who's so ill-fitted for being a villain, and yet they want to do it anyway.
Yeah, like, why are you doing this? Somebody said I couldn't. So I am. Like, but you're like a cleric, I know, but
yeah, when we were talking before about villains who you can't understand, this is the epitome of that. It's like a villain who's really only doing it just because somebody dared them to.
It's like, have you ever watched One Punch Man?
Yes. Oh, I've seen the first series anyway.
Yeah. So Saitama's just there, like it just seemed like a good thing to do to become the strongest in existence. like it's the same thing with this villain guy. Like, I just felt like I should take over the kingdom at some point. Seemed like an interesting thing to do. Sorry.
and the more people try and stop you, the more you're like, no, I've committed to doing this now. And it's like you're kind of so on doing something, but as soon as someone is like, no, you're not going to do that anymore, you're like, no, I'm doing it.
It's like vindication, isn't it? The fact that they keep sending these people out to stop you, or these people keep trying to stop you. You're like, oh well, I must be doing something right.
Yeah, because I'm important enough to be trying to stop.
Yeah. Like, and then just suddenly, oh shit, no, he's actually got really strong somehow. Hello, emergency. It's almost like that thing with in The Incredibles with Syndrome, where he keeps sending that robot out to lose, doesn't he?
Yes.
Against but it's actually a person. Like, oh, so you're going to try and shoot me with Eldritch Blast. So I'm just gonna, okay. Oh, you've got spell. I remember you've got Spell Sniper. So I'm just gonna get really close to you and then Mage Slayer you every time you do anything. Like it's cool. I've learned things. It's a really cool idea. I like that.
Have you ever? Here's a question for you. Have you ever seen or heard of the use of a meta villain in TRPGs?
Never a meta villain in TTRPGs, but usually in video games. You'd hear so. I think there's a game series called Disgaea.
I've heard of it, but go on, tell me about
it. There's like a vampire character who he literally calls mid boss. And he's like, I'm not the mid boss. Like at the actual boss, he's like, you're not the big bad guy though. And he's like, what? Hang on, like this whole game is like, and he knows that he's like kind of like in a video game, and they never remember his name. But yeah, it would be cool to have like a meta villain who knows. Like, I guess what to do. Because are we talking meta as in like they know that they're in a tabletop RPG? Or are we talking about the fact that they prescribe to the meta of play, i.e., I know that I'm going to fight these people, therefore I'm going to prepare to fight these people.
Maybe a mixture of both. I was talking more about the idea where, like, almost as you were describing it, they're saying, "Oh yeah, I know you have Spell Sniper. Like, I've read your character sheet," and you're like, "What?" And it's like, I know. It says in your backstory here that I've got in my hand that you're from, this village, and your father died. That's really tragic. But okay, we can like, I imagine a villain who's like critiquing your backstory writing. It's like, you're an orphan. How original. But also what I was talking about is the idea of, I don't know if you've ever seen anything like this in play, but I've read a lot of stories about enemies who are like so cosmic and strange and different that their attacks literally, like, so you get hit by an attack, you roll a d4, and it's like, that's how many points in Constitution you lose because you got hit. Or like, your backstory is partially rewritten because you were hit, and it's like, you're not actually from this village, you're from a different village, or you grew up as a prince, or you're the king of this land now because you got hit in the wrong way. And it's like negatively affecting you in a meta sense where you get your character is kind of like physically changed by a cosmic being that has the power to do those kind of things.
So I had a boss. So I had something like this, but it wasn't quite so. So they had to go to Elysium to fight this boss who was like a relic from the war between like the heavens and the hells.
Very cool.
Basically, he's half and half, like exactly.
Mm-hmm.
They like went to it's almost like the Blood Hunter thing of like, to kill monsters you sometimes need to become monsters. Or the Witcher. And so he existed in this hall of mirrors that showed you like all the different ways you could have gone.
Right. Like, cool.
And there was a saving throw in there that basically, I think it might have been Constitution. It was Constitution saving throw, where basically you would then roll on a random table and it would change you to be one of those things that's in the mirrors, and you'd be trapped in the mirror. Right. So one of my characters, it was kind of like a dandy and a bit of a hedonist. He was this headless tiefling rogue, and basically the problem he had is he kept failing the saving throw, and he was basically a junkie for the entire fight. Like, he was going cold turkey on the floor, like dying, because of the fact that like if he hadn't found the party and if things had gone a different way, that's what would have happened to him. He would have been found dead in a ditch with like a needle in his arm or something like that. And so he had that, and some of the others like shifted in and out of like. There's a thing where you don't meet your. There's an alternate reality where you didn't meet your partner, and therefore you have no reason to be here. Like,
where's your motivation gone?
I think the other one was the fact that one of them did get married, like in the mirror, so they were gone as well because they were married. And basically, you made that thing at the end of every turn, so there was like multiple like little things that could happen to you. So there was ones that made you incapacitated. There were ones that made you charmed. So there was one where this character basically was on their side. Like, it was like, oh yeah, there's an alternate reality where I come collect you and I pick you up and you become like my mortal lieutenant. Oh, cool. Fight your friends. Like, I was like, oh shit, yeah. And so I kind of like that, but not in the fact that they knew, just in the fact that by nature of these mirrors around this place that kept this creature contained, because that's what it did, is it kept the creature contained.
It's kind of like a cage like for them, but it becomes a cage for you. That is an idea that is so good that I'm actually going to have to try hard not to steal that.
You can steal it.
No,
dude. Magpie it. It's fine. It's fine. Like, I half stole it from. It's a TV show. I can't remember if it's like Buffy or something. But there's an episode of something where they do like alternate realities and what could have happened. Almost like what's that Christmas film? It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes, so it's like, what would have happened if this had really
Yeah.
happened? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool.
so-
That's an interesting idea.
So I think there was a TV show that kept cycling them through things like that. Like I think it did it with each member of the cast. So like, what would have happened if you didn't meet this person, or this person never been in your life? Where would they be now? Rah, rah, rah. It was really interesting. So I was like, I'm going to steal that, put it in my game. But yeah. I've never had a meta, like proper meta villain who's almost like to the thing of, say, is it Mad Jim Jaspers and stuff from like comics and stuff like that, who like know they're in comic books and stuff like that, or Wade Wilson from Deadpool, who's like knows he's in a comic book, or an even better example is Gwenpool, because she literally at some point writes herself into other people's stories.
Right,
like
cool.
you literally watch her and she goes, and she like picks up a version of like Miss Marvel and then draws herself in it, and then she appears in the Miss Marvel comic book, and she's like, see, this is much better. Like, because she knows she's in the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
And there's loads of other characters like that in. It's mainly in Marvel where they do that. There's a couple in DC, like they had the Joker do that for a little while. The fact that he was like, well, it doesn't matter what we do anyway, because give it half a year and they'll reboot us and we'll just be back at this again. Yeah, like we'll just be back at it again. It's like because he actually references, there's a point where he's like fighting Red Hood, and he goes, "How many times have I killed you now?" Like, and it's like, and Jason's like, "The once," and he's like, "Oh yeah, but like I've done it in different ways at different times." Like, they did that. So I think those would be cool, but I think there's a thing that players might revolt against that sort of thing as well. Do you think that players would like that?
I think messing with player backgrounds is always a dangerous game. Whenever, definitely, I think some players do have that tendency to be like, even if you go, oh, and you know this person, and they go, no, I didn't write that in my backstory, and I'm kind of like, well, like, suspend your disbelief slightly. I, as the story crafter here, might suggest that you know that person. I think there is kind of that idea of getting caught up in, you are the person that you've written, but at the end of the day, you're not in your story. You're in a story that you share with others and that I'm telling to you.
I do that. I'm quite sneaky with that because I'm a very player-driven DM. So I'll take your backstories and mess with them, and I'll bring in people that you don't want me to bring in and stuff like that. Like I'm that guy.
Yeah.
Because I like player-driven stories. I like each player to get their spotlight and them to learn things. So, like for example, I took my players to this place that messed with your memories, and basically they entered this room which became a game where they had to collect different memories from different people that were different colors that represented each person. So they collected these crystals and they'd get those memories. So they learned things about each other. Like we learned that one of the characters had been married before and her husband cheated on her, so that's why she has very like hard time dealing with like relationships now and stuff like that. So I usually do that. Like, this person looks familiar, or this person says they're from here, which I know is like one of their like. And you go, and most of the time you'll play 9 times out of 10, the players will ask, "Well, do I know them?" Like, I'm like, roll a history check, and you may, if you want them to know them, you make the DC check really low, and then
otherwise,
or if you're like, actually, it would be interesting for them to try and find out if they know them, like you may say really high, because sometimes they get like, "Well, who is it?" And I'm like, you have to find out. Like, do you talk to them? Like I'm cruel like that. I will admit, like, I know there's a lot of like people on the Facebooks and the Reddits who are like, "Oh, I feel as if I put anything in my backstory, my DM's going to use it," and I'm there like,
that's the whole point.
Yeah.
why bother writing a backstory if you don't want your DM to incorporate it?
Yeah, and that's the same thing with villains. I feel like if your villain is like, if your villain's like Mr. Freeze, and you're going to write that backstory, but then you won't let the players use it, because in the same way that I will use my players' backstories, I will let them use, if they find out things about my villains, I'll let them use it. Like, So if you think about like Mr. Freeze and the fact that he's trying to save his wife, if that was a D&D situation, you had like this crazy artificer who's going around freezing people, and they found his wife who was obviously sick, and I would then let them go, well, he's trying to free his wife, so why don't we just say that we'll let his wife out if he
Yeah. I think getting one over on the villain, and I guess on the DM as well, is a really key part of what I think incorporates a good session, where your player does something, or players do something that you're so far removed from the idea of what you're expecting that you just have to go, okay, like
I'll allow it. Like,
yeah, I think one of the most one of the most recent things that happened literally yesterday is a Kraken was attacking my players and their ship is being destroyed. And one of my players goes, I cast Detect Thoughts on the Kraken. What's going on? I'm like, you know what? Here's a time for some backstory on why the Kraken's here and what's the Kraken's about. Because you should, I feel like, even if you have to improv something or take a second to be like, oh, okay, I think it's really important to reward players for thinking outside the box a little bit, especially when it comes to villains. And like, literally, this is the reason you've gone on an adventure, probably. So, or the reason you're fighting so hard to do something is because you're trying to stop this person. So thinking interestingly about why they exist and what they're doing is, I think, should be really rewarded. Like you say, like for a player to be able to use a villain's backstory is really important.
It's like I had one where I'd set up this zombie beholder fight for ages, and it come out, eye stalks on like bones and stuff, like rattling, and then my warlock's just there like, so I would know that thing's not relative to this plane, right? Like, because they were in the air elemental plane, like no, they were in the elemental plane of water. Sorry, in like a sunken city that had been sent there.
Very cool.
There's like a weapon that was used to like transport this city into the water elemental plane to drown it.
That's so interesting.
And basically, the warlock went, I know that's from like the prime material plane, right? And I'm like, yeah, or the astral sea, whichever one. And he goes, I'm going to send it to the prime material plane with banishment. And I'm like, okay. And he did. And obviously, it's its home plane. It was there for a minute. Fight's over. Like,
yeah.
I'm like, alrighty then. And it didn't help that they'd been through the zoo. Like, so there was like a zoo of like creatures that they'd been through, and they'd seen like dead creatures and stuff in there, and they'd seen that the beholder cage was like broken, or I was like, god damn it. Like, I was like setting up, it stinks in there, it comes out like, and then fuck off, ghost. Like, it was gone. But yeah. So Oscar, we've had a great chat. It's been
It's been really amazing.
Enjoyed it. So before we say our goodbyes, and I'll let you plug your wares and all that jazz, I have one question for you.
Go on.
Can you face the pod of many things and the deck of many questions?
Well, I hope so.
So, for those of you listening, the deck of many questions is our community suggested spicy questions that we pull from a hat randomly, or in this case, Oscar's going to suggest a number, and if there's enough time, I will also let him ask me one and give me a number. They will be randomly selected, so think of one number between 1 and 75. Oscar?
Can I roll some D100s?
You can roll D100s. You do it in whatever way you want. But if you wish to, as a listener, suggest anything for the deck of many questions, please throw them in the comments, in tweets, in reviews, in whatever. Let me know, because I will add them to our deck of many questions. So, what we got, Oz?
My number is 16.
This is quite interesting, actually. So, number 16, what are your biggest inspirations for writing?
Oh, this is handy because I'm a writer. I think... Oh, I have to say music is a big one. Not necessarily because I listen to music about things and then I write about those things. More along the lines of when I listen to a track and I think this would go great to the backing of a pirate invasion, or this would be amazing for...
I'm not the only person who does that.
Yeah, amazing.
Oh, yeah. Keep going. Sorry.
And, you know, like things like, okay, this is them rocking up at the Empress Palace, and this is what that sounds like, and this is the space they're in. And even if I don't actually use it in the session, it's great to get that inspiration of this is the vibe of the place I want to make, of the idea I want to create, or of the situation I want to create. Often I'm very surprised at the amount of narrative structures I'm able to make just by listening to a 3-minute song.
That is pretty dope.
And beyond that, music is very much kind of like a very, I would say, something I'm doing quite often. So when I listen to music, often I'm coming up with ideas. But if we're talking like inspiration as in like taking inspiration from things, I would have to say that it's very boring to say games, films, and TV.
Nothing's original under the sun, is it? So
true. I wish I had a more creative answer to that.
Is there a particular book or film or TV show that you find yourself stealing stuff from?
We've spoken a lot about Star Wars, and I would be lying if I hadn't said that Star Wars gives me a lot of things. But I think more often it's more often the subtle things that aren't usually what you might say popular culture, like gripping dramas, or like a story about real people and real things, and you go, well, that'd be good if that person was an elf and this person was a dragon and this was this situation. Being able to turn like a real situation into something that is so much life is brought into it by being in a fantasy or sci-fi or post-apocalyptic or whatever setting is a really interesting activity.
That's awesome. Would you like to roll D100s for my question?
Absolutely, I would. Get ready. I'm going to roll you a tough question. What is my 47? There we
go. We've got. I'm not answering the question that's there. That's obviously what I haven't realised. It's what's your show size? And I'm guessing, and I don't really. I don't know if that's a placeholder or a joke question that someone's put in there from back when there was 3 of us. But it's
what's
not
your shows? What does that question refer to? Why don't you answer? Why don't you tell me what the question refers to as an answer to that question?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Yeah,
it refers to erect penises. But I'm not going to answer that. That's obviously my friend Leon. But I will answer the one. I can answer either the one above or below it. So the one above it is what is your favorite monster, and the other one. So 46 is what is your favorite monster, and 48 is what's your favorite D&D content.
I'm gonna give you the broader question. I'm gonna say, what's your favorite D&D content?
So my favorite D&D content is people like Dawnforge Cast.
I really thought you were about to go, people like you. I'm like, that's very kind of you, Addison.
Dawnforge Cast, like people who do interesting like YouTube videos and tutorials on the internet. Like it's one of the ways that I learned to play quite quickly. Was looking at like how to build monks like online and stuff like that. So I really like that sort of content, and like I think I can't. Is it Taking 20? Does this thing like kill your party with kobolds? And I'm like, yeah, those are fun because it's like, what can kobolds do that can really mess up an adventuring party and stuff like that? And what could you work on? So I really like stuff like that. I like Critical Role. Like, it's my favorite podcast in terms of like actual play. I'm not a massive fan of other actual play podcasts. Admittedly,
Really?
I find them difficult to play in because of the fact that or not to play in, to listen to and to like attach to because of the fact that obviously Critical Role has these actors whose voices I recognize from like my favorite games and anime, like and like a lot of their jokes come from being in what's it a lot of their jokes come from what happens inside the game, whereas sometimes when you watch like I'll call them normal people because they're not professional actors and stuff like that. They have a lot of in jokes where I'm like, I don't understand why that's funny, like and you're kind of like there, and there's this like awkward moment where you're like, am I dumb? Like, so because even like I would understand even now if people looked at my so I play in a lot of an actual play at the minute stream for Mecha Hack, and mainly, and I'd understand if people couldn't do the same thing, like if they really found it difficult to like latch onto it and get involved with it on the Flickering Torch channel, because of the fact that, damn it, I'd almost went the whole thing without mentioning him.
It's like this is an in joke for this podcast.
I always mention my friend Ben, who's the Flickering Torch, who makes great content. Don't get me wrong, and his stream's great, but I always end up mentioning him, like even when I don't mean to, like because most of my tabletop RPG stuff that I do at the minute is with him and like talking to him. So, but yeah, it's just I just feel as though that's not my favorite. So my favorite is like build these or rank these subclasses and stuff like that, like short form, and then these sorts of podcasts where people listen to like podcasts of people doing interviews and stuff rather than actual play or like tutorials. So yeah, that's been this episode of the Pod of Many Things with Oscar. Thanks, Oz, for coming on. It's been a fucking pleasure having you, my friend.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's all right. Can you tell us where you can find you on the internet and what you do, and if you've got anything coming up?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Oscar_Wightman. That's WIGHTMAN. I know it's a weird spelling, but it's like the D&D monster, so that should be easier for you to spell. I am currently working on a lot of written modules for 5e, although none of them are for anywhere to see. So just check me out on Twitter, and soon, hopefully, you'll be able to see something very exciting. I'm hoping to hopefully start a Kickstarter for my written work, which is kind of like this fantasy noir one that I've spoken about later this year. So keep an eye out.
I will, and we'll promote the hell out of that. So yeah, thanks very much again to Oz, and for those of you still listening, still here, still hanging out, I hope whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you are, you're safe, you're well, and you're having a great time playing some great games. Peace.